Hello, welcome to some Derps Talk About Games. I'm your co-host, Mango.
And I am your co-host, Buddy.
And today we're going to talk a little bit about a lot of things. Before we do that, but I don't want you the folks at home what it is we do on this podcast.
On this podcast, we talk about games, but also on this podcast, I guess we just like bank up a gazillion topics and then do them all in one gigantic sprint. In the announcement, I wrote 5 things. No, I'm sorry, I wrote 4 things, right? And we're gonna try to hit all of these. Gen Con MTG proxies, 11.2 first impressions, and DK Bonanza. 2 of these are kind of, I mean, all of these are all of ours. Where do you want to start first?
Let's start with Gen Con. It's fresh in the mind.
Sure.
Obviously didn't go this year. But maybe we can convince you to go. The thing I wanted to talk about most here was just kind of my experience playing some of these con games. And I've always had a great time at Gen Con. But I've had individual different experiences, and a weird pattern that has come out of this last trip is that I feel like the right thing to do for our TTRPG sessions is to find a game being run by a single person, because that probably means that person really loves that system. We've played some really great con games run by groups, like the Luchador game was like that, where it was just kind of like a room full of GMs. But I had twice the same thing happen to me at this con, which is a large company was running games run by independent GMs that they had hired, and they had failed to give the GMs all of the materials required to run the games before the game started. And as a result, the game was kind of a clusterfuck. And it was still a good time, but like the first example of this was Eldritch Automata. Eldritch Automata, cool concept for a game. It's basically imagine Neon Genesis Evangelion and like Pacific Rim and all that kind of stuff rolled up into one setting wise, right? But it's meant to be a little bit more general, right? Like it's meant to be kind of like you can stretch and smush it. And so the quick start guide, which is available on the internet, indicates the mechs are supposed to be like 80 meters tall, right? These are big fucking mechs. But the scenario that we were running was like they're like 15 feet tall, maybe, right? Like they're like just because these enemies come through the wall and they're like 7 feet tall. I'm like, oh, are we on foot? It says here, and then they're like, oh, and then like so. The person running the game doesn't know. The person that came over to help our GM run the game is like, oh, no, they're supposed to be smaller. I'm like, oh, okay. But basically, the way this game ended up working is a couple of us found the guide online. We're trying to help the GM through with some of this stuff. And then one of the people at the table was like, wait, this is just like the alien system. And so we were able to run off of his knowledge and just kind of bumble through it, which, I don't think it's the GM's fault. We had a good time anyway, but like it is just not, it was just like not a good showing, I think, for Gehenna Gaming is the name of the publisher, and I'm comfortable calling them out because they didn't prepare the GM properly.
Yeah, I'm trying to think for a minute, because one of the things that I said about Gen Con before I failed to return for like the last like 5 fucking years in a row was the next time I do Gen Con, I want to host my own game. I want to like run my own game there. And what would I do? What would I do with that? Like, I feel like I wouldn't want to do, you don't want to do like Pathfinder D&D, right? That's boring. But I don't know what I would pick of all of the other kind of extra sort of systems that we've played. Maybe I would pick something like Last Exodus or Underworld, those incredibly weird esoteric games that from the Jaffe brothers from my hometown way long ago. I could maybe see something like Seventh Sea work, or maybe like WFRP actually would probably be the best one for this.
Yeah, you want something that isn't being run by somebody else, or isn't being run by the parent company, essentially. Just to kind of finish out the like con game on the bad side of things, Cyberpunk Red had the same exact problem, and I was really surprised because it's Cyberpunk, and those games were in demand.
Yeah.
But like basically the same exact problem, except the GM knew the system, and but just like basically got called in at the last minute and wasn't given the scenario prep, so we kind of bumbled through that. But it worked. That worked out fine. So don't want to crash on that too much because we got through everything essentially. But that game was a little bit weird because we managed to, you know how like the way a cyberpunk game goes is like it's a job. This should be easy, in and out, and then there's some complication that makes it goes off the rail. We managed to dodge the complications, and it was easy. And we finished like we managed to like sweet talk our way through like the complication and just get out. Like at the very end, it was like, hey, you mess with my data, I'm only gonna pay you part. And our party was like, you know what, that's fair. We'll take a cut and pay. And we just like walked off into the sunset.
That is pretty fair. Did you do any like mega games or anything like that?
So I did. Before I get to the mega games, I do want to call out 2 games. So in terms of the one person running a game they really care about, there's this game called Blackbirds. It came out 2 years ago. My understanding, and this is from the people at the con, is that it was an ambitious project that never kind of reached where the creators wanted it to. It kind of fell off. And I don't know if it's the same people or new people are trying to restart it, and they're launching another Kickstarter in, I think, September is what they said on the Discord. But the person running this game is just an independent GM that loves the system. It's based actually, I think, it's based on Zweihander, which is based on the original WFRP.
Yeah, the original WFRP. Yep.
So what happened was I bought this book 2 years ago, like the special edition, because somebody opened the book and was like, look at how pretty the art is. I'm like, that art's really pretty. And that was my big Gen Con purchase. But I never read it to any significant degree. But basically everybody in the game was like, I either played Blackbirds once, or I heard of Blackbirds and I hear it's incredible. I want to play this game. This guy ran 3 sessions. I was only able to get into him. It was weird because like, I guess the middle session was a group of people that all just did that session, but sessions 1 and session 3 were basically all the same people. And we just played, and it was like a beginning of the campaign, middle of the campaign, end of the campaign type thing. And it was phenomenal. The GM knew his source material inside and out because he wrote it all, right? Like, he wrote all the scenario material, and he loved the system, and everybody was engaged, and it was fantastic. The other system in this vein was, it's called Earthwild. Earthwild is a fan content licensed version of Destiny, the video game, and it feels just like Destiny. It is impressive how much it feels like Destiny. Every gun has like, the traits you get in a Destiny gun that all have like little combat effects. It is one of the crunchiest indie RPGs I've ever played, because most of these indie RPGs are like very mechanics light and very kind of like, and then you do role play, right? Like that. Like I feel like the indie RPGs tend to be a lot more fluffy. This is super crunch, super great representation of the Destiny experience in tabletop form. And basically at the con there were 2 people running it. The guy who invented the system and like his best friend. I played with the friend. His name's like Damn Scout, I think is his name on Discord. But he's like, yeah, if you guys are interested, join the Discord. The guy's always putting up provisions. So it's fun. So it's a D12 based system. It's like a pool system, and it's D12 because the D12s are engrams from Destiny, right? Like an engram is the same shape.
Oh my god, I have heard good things about it. So because there, I read like, this is like 4 or 5 years ago at this point. I read like an article talking about different dice-based systems. It basically went through D6s, D10s, D12s, and D20s as individual sort of tiers. This is how I started thinking about probability, and I think it helped me understand the crunch of D20 systems better, because it basically was like, and then you get to D20 systems, and D20 systems are really nice because of the elegance of every +1 equals 5%. Success rate, right? And once that like clicked from my brain, I was like, oh, I get it. This makes so much sense. I used to think +2 bonuses were super lame. I was like, this sucks. Who cares? +2, whatever, right? But a +2 bonus is a 10% success rate, that's insane. That's so good, right? Especially because, I mean, whatever, there's more numbers stuff that you can kind of go into, but one of the ones that they talked about was D12s as like a base system, which I think actually comes from the board game stuff that we once played when we went to your historical minis. That system was also D12 based, but in a weird way. And yeah, and it was like, yeah, if you want to base things on D12s, you can. D12s are kind of elegant for a number of reasons. One of the things that people like about, or it's one of the things that makes D12 systems good, is you can get a whole fist of them and roll them together, and that's like a satisfying thing to do. So you can kind of, it's like more of a dice pool system, which is part of what they were talking about with D6s. Which weirdly now I have a better understanding of D6 systems because of playing Warhammer. But yeah, that's it. That's really interesting.
Yeah, no, and
The fact that it's engrams is very cute.
And it's a weird system because it's like precision hits on, I think it's 1 through 4, and then base hits on like 10 through 12. But it's like there's like some stat thing in there that I don't quite remember. It was just like kind of the power level we were all at. It's like you hit on a 1 through 4 or a 10 through 12. Don't get in the middle, which is like the weirdest fucking system in that I've ever played.
Yeah, it's one of those things that's interesting because I like, for instance, this is what I like about WFRP. WFRP has very low hit points, but the dynamic is much more about sort of, can you get hits through someone's armor? In D&D, armor is just that you clear hurdle and now you're on hit points. In WFRP, like in actual Warhammer, right, you roll to hit and then you roll to see if you deal the damage or if their armor saves them from damage. And that's actually where there's the, you can get hit a lot. You can be like a tank class in a WFRP game with very heavy armor, and you're taking a lot of hits, but your armor is soaking all of it up because you keep hitting your armor saves, right? Versus you could play a version of WFRP where you don't get very many hits, but when you do, you have a lot of AP and you're penetrating and you're dealing your damage, and all of that ends in a certain sort of scenario. But I've always found the differences between those two systems to be pretty interesting and compelling. Really, I'm just talking myself into wanting to play WFRP whenever I think about like indie non D20 based systems. I always am gonna go back to that one. Though I did like Fantasy Flight. I did like Star Wars. I could
yeah, Fantasy Flight Star Wars was good. Someday. Yeah. But yeah, to go to your earlier question about mega games, I played 2 NSDM games. And I'm kind of rolling in on more thoughts on this. I actually want to write this as feedback to them at some point. But basically, first game I played, one was present day vague science fiction. The other was Cold War science fiction. And the first one, the science fiction, was a rogue AI in North Korea. But I drew member of the Russian Federal Council representing Moscow. And it was neat. So, and in the Cold War game, the sci-fi thing didn't really come up. I think they found a UFO off the coast of Scotland, but I think England just like didn't tell anybody. So it was otherwise just kind of like a regular kind of like run the government for 4 years thing. I drew J. Edgar Hoover for that, or I drew the FBI. Which I thought was going to be interesting and fun, but no one in the United States tried to like defect or anything, so I didn't have a ton to do there. And so I think my criticism of this is going to be, if you draw lesser kind of domestic, domestic cards, like rolls, it is harder to get things going because most of the driving action is something on the international stage, right? Like my favorite games have been where I played as the mayor of Seoul, which is a domestic card, but Seoul gets nuked, and so it's at the center of kind of like that international conflict. And the other one was I played like the minor foreign relations diplomat to South America for China. And that game, I basically sat with like the South American cell controller the whole time and like played basically PvE on the game. And that was fun, but I had like the opportunity, like I had something to do there. The problem with the domestic roles is like the cell controller for the big powers is busy dealing with like everybody else in the cell, right? Like I can't sit down with, the United States or the Russian cell controller and just like badger him with questions about like, the internal Russian peasantry, or like, what are the hippies doing on, like, or actually the House, like the person who represented basically the ethnic minorities in the United States, Democrats, asked me specifically to go like investigate the Ku Klux Klan, and like I told the controller I was doing that, and like maybe this is on the controller, but like basically what he told me was like, yeah, they're following the law. There's nothing you can do about it, right? Like they're just like protest, they're just like being obnoxious, but they're they're not doing anything that warrants FBI intervention. And it's like, well, what am I going to do? Right? Like I'm going to sit here and like, I got my funding increase, which is like my only goal. And then I just kind of sat there and watched the rest of the game play out. Same thing like with Moscow. Every time somebody came to me for a signature, like the thing on my card is like, get more power in Moscow, basically what he was like, oh, you want to build this project? Build it in Moscow and I'll sign, right? Like, I felt like I was playing my role right, but there wasn't a lot of there, right? There wasn't a lot for me to like, once I found out about the AI, I was like, we're going to build a fucking data center in Moscow and like start our own LLM, but nothing ever came of that. I was like, I'm trying to force something to happen, right? But, so
yeah, I would
go on.
really be interested to peel one of these apart. You know what I mean? I feel like this is almost like a kind of a reverse Dunning-Kruger moment for me, in the sense that I understand the sort of nature, I guess I would say, of creating kind of games from scratch. I think that's like a hard thing to do, and I'm sure people were thinking about stuff like this at the time. But I definitely understand sort of where the failures come from, because I've also had experiences like that. Even when we were doing the mega games and I was really loving them, right? There were moments where I just kind of was like, "Oh, I see. I'm the one who's done." Like the bureaucracy of this whole game is going to play out without my agency, because I have accomplished whatever thing I sort of like needed to accomplish. And I would just be really interested to see how these games kind of get constructed. What do they tell the controllers? How do the controllers sort of act? Because I feel like what I would want to do if I were building one of these is I would want to empower controllers to make complicated sort of improvisational calls on the fly, but also at the same time I feel like that is probably a recipe for disaster, because now you have individual actors who are spiraling the game out of control because there are multiple different controllers, and now everybody has to be aware of like the fact that I'm going to design a mini game for J. Edgar Hoover to investigate the Ku Klux Klan that is going to play into the final narrative in a way that like other people. This is what I kind of mean by the bureaucracy of it.
Yeah, and the NSDMs are a little bit less mechanized than like some of the other mega games, but like I don't know. I feel like if I had unlimited manpower and unlimited like the thing that popped into my head was something like, oh, have 2 controllers for each major cell, like for each major nation, and have one of them dedicated to like domestic issues and one of them dedicated to the international issues. That way, like if the president needs to go like negotiate with Russia, he's not being held up by like, the Dixiecrats talking about like the legislation they want to pass. Actually, so I have to tell the story just because it was kind of darkly hilarious. So somebody gets assigned the Southern Dixiecrats, right? Like in the US game. And when everybody's introducing themselves, he says, I'm interested in stopping the communists and upholding separate but equal, right? Like, like that's the policy, right? Like that's the character, right? And sure. the way the player described it to me is like he saw somebody like across the room look like that he had just punched them in the stomach, and he was like, it's the game. He had to go over them and apologize. Like, look, it's the game. I don't believe in that. But that's the way it were, right? Like,
yeah.
But that was, that was a fun, like the games are still fun, right? Like they almost impeached the president. I think because the president was just kind of like So the way the mechanic of the game works is you write things down on sheets, and everything in the United States basically needs to be voted on by Congress and then approved by the president, um, or vetoed. But what the president was doing was the equivalent of kind of like a soft veto or whatever. He was just like holding the pieces of paper, just like not signing them, right? And like just like walking around. And I don't know if he was doing that on purpose or not, but it was kind of hilarious. But they started overriding the veto. Like the Congress just started like passing stuff, right? So what happened is because I had nothing to do but like ask for funding, was I just kept like yelling about getting the FBI more funding, which is what J. Edgar Hoover did, right? Like, he like brought the funding up. And I had gotten enough people on board. They were like, yeah. And like the president like held on to my paper for like, a session of Congress, because that's the way they decided to do it. Just like every like half hour or so, they just called all the Congress members together and was like, we're voting on these, right? And just like held it between two of them. And I was like, I think he's holding my piece of paper. I don't think he's like, gonna let me pass my funding. And so they passed mine through over the veto with a bunch of other stuff that he was doing the same thing with. And then they voted to impeach him. And basically the way it went is they impeached, but they didn't convict, because they realized that like, impeaching who was probably the squeakiest cleanest president. I think it was who was it? Yeah, Eisenhower. It was Eisenhower.
Okay.
Yeah. But then his term ended, and the ticket that won was a Johnson-Nixon unity ticket. Because the biggest threat was Goldwater. And so so Nixon defected from the Republicans to run as the vice president for Johnson.
Wow.
Yeah.
So this skips there was no JFK?
I guess
60 is JFK, right? That's JFK Johnson.
It must have been whoever represented him must not have had like JFK on the card, because he didn't even come up.
Okay.
But yeah, it was. But it was still a good time. It was a great time, as it kind of always is. But those are my big Gen Con kind of points. Do I have any other big thoughts? I don't know. This is maybe a little bit off track, but like, I've been to Indy for like 10 years now, right? I've started not necessarily eating at the con and started like walking around and eating in greater Indianapolis. There are some good places to eat out there. So, like, this is actually the first time. So I ended up staying at a hotel along the canal. The canal is really pretty. I recommend walking along the canal in Indianapolis. If you find yourself in Indianapolis with nothing better to do, for an afternoon.
No, they had a canal. That's cute.
Yeah. It is like right by the convention center. It's just kind of like turns.
Oh, I do know where this is, actually, thinking about it.
Yeah.
Now that I'm like looking at where it is, because I can pretty clearly see
you can see it from the JW pretty clearly. But I stayed further up. There are a couple of hotels that are like half a mile away. And it's nice because it's like below street level, and you can walk most of the way to the convention center on the canal. So yeah.
Why did this canal get made?
I honestly don't know.
It connects. I guess it must have been to pull stuff downtown, like to allow like barges that are coming up the White River, I guess, or something. You have to I'm sorry. I have to like do the fucking topography of this. So the White River has to be like the Ohio River basin, right? Like that's what we're.
Yeah, so apparently it was initially intended to connect the Wabash and Erie Canal to the Ohio River. With Indiana's attempt to take part in the canal building craze started by the Erie Canal. And a bunch of money was allocated to it, but due to the Panic of 1837, the canal work had to be stopped in 1839. So I guess it's just kind of like an abandoned larger project.
I guess so. Oh yeah, okay. So here's where it hits the Wabash, which is the Indiana-Illinois border, which hits the Ohio. Yeah, which hits the Ohio here. Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, the Erie Canal is like a topic that I have found myself sort of like weirdly not obsessed with, but just like interested in.
There's some doom
Partially
boats
because like,
associated with the Erie Canal, aren't there?
what do you mean?
Wasn't there something that happened on the Erie, or maybe I'm thinking of one of the great. I feel like there's like a couple of different things that happened in like that area of the country. Maybe I'm wrong.
I was watching a video by Derpy Award winner Sean Munger where he described the Erie Canal as the reason New York City became the center of the world. This was the thing that I found so compelling. Basically, he sort of described how the Erie Canal allowed Rust Belt steel to travel to the Hudson and hit New York Harbor for the purposes of shipping, but also just for the purposes of building skyscrapers. It made steel, like stainless steel, industrial grade steel, so cheap and easy to transport, that it is the reason that, and I just, because that is like a wild concept to me. I do think of New York as the center. Like, I think it's the, I would say it's the most important city on the planet, right? And it's just like weird to think of like small sort of, I don't know, butterfly effect-ish level kind of decisions. Somebody, I mean, not that the Erie Canal is small, it cuts across the entirety of New York State, right? But just as like an interesting reason, everybody else would say some other collection of things like, oh, it happened, it was because of this, it was because of the immigration, all of these other kinds of things. And I do think that those things sort of matter, but the idea that the Erie Canal just drove steel prices to the fucking floor and allowed people to build gigantic tenements and skyscrapers to house all of those immigrants and all the rest of that kind of stuff is I just find that insanely compelling, right? As just like a piece of history. Partially because it does go through, an important town for my family, Ithaca, New York.
You know what, Delph? It is the greatest city in the world. Definitely better than fucking Philadelphia.
Definitely better than fucking Philadelphia, all right? Okay.
But just kind of on that thing about like these various factors, I'm just reminded there's just like, I think it's a tweet that's like, everything is monocausal, and it's exactly the thing I'm on my shit about right now, right? Like,
yeah. It's funny. Holy fuck! I just watched Jurassic Park. When was the last time you watched Jurassic Park, the original one? Do you know?
No.
I think I hadn't seen it since college. And it is funny to me because I think of the most interesting character in Jurassic Park is Ian Malcolm. I actually will say, for the sake of the podcast, I was talking to Lou about this last night. I think I like The Lost World better than the original Jurassic Park, even though I think Jurassic Park, the original, is a better movie. It's like a better film. I watched both of them last night, back to back, and I really loved The Lost World. The Lost World was a lot of fun. It was just, there was more in the plot that I found just kind of compelling, and there's a lot of stuff that happens that is funny and interesting, even if it is just kind of a worse movie with less on its mind. It's not a very smart movie, but it's just like it's like a good ride. Like there's a whole thing about, Pete Postlethwaite is like this big game hunter and, hired to go back to the island, and they team up and everything like that. Anyway, in the first movie, I remember thinking of Ian Malcolm as like the most interesting character, right? Ian Malcolm gets to be Han Solo to Alan Grant's Luke Skywalker. That's how I probably would have originally put it. Ian Malcolm is kind of so boring. He does nothing. He makes no decisions. He just kind of does shtick. But one of the things that he says that I do agree with, right? Is the idea that, he does the thing with Laura Dern when he is trying to like clearly trying to seduce Alan Grant's wife right in front of him, where he like puts the drop of water on her hand, and on the first time it goes one way and the second time it goes that way, and he's basically challenging the notion of science, right, by basically saying like there are too many variations and variables to keep track of, and even when we try and control our experiments, right, these things kind of like don't happen, which is a thing that I do agree with. I think that's true about kind of like the world, but also it's just funny to me that like he kind of does nothing. He gets really fucked up right in the beginning and breaks his leg, and then has no interesting decisions left for the rest of the movie. It's all Alan Grant and whatever Lord Dern's character's name is.
Yeah, well, you know, and what?
It's a grab bag episode. Okay, I'm allowed to.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm just trying to figure out how that ties back to the.
I don't even know how it's.
Hey?
It's you know the everything is monocausal kind of thing.
Okay, yeah.
It is also wild that Ian Malcolm is even there in the first place. Like, do you ever think about that? What was he fucking doing? I understand you get two paleontologists put him on the ride to get the endorsement or whatever. Okay, that makes sense. The lawyer representing the investors. Okay, that makes sense. What the fuck was a chaos theory mathematician doing there? Are you gonna get
becoming a magic card
playmate?
Hey, it's ordered. It is ordered. So you know.
No, wait. Where did you order it from? Did you
Amazon? I used the Amazon. Okay. Yeah. And I sat down and self-edited a thing together. I'm excited. I will show it to the cast and to you when I get it in like a couple of weeks.
I have honestly. I said that thing about we should all get movie screenshots. We should have playmats of like things from movies. And my brain, like the other night, I didn't get to bed until 6 a.m. because I was just sitting there obsessing about this fucking. I was like, oh, this would be so good. This would be so funny. I thought of like 1,000 screenshots from Zack Snyder movies. I was like, I could get a Seven Samurai one of the flag or all of them standing. You know what I mean? You could just see so many of these. And I want to do all of them now is where it actually comes down to.
Yeah. No. So, I know controversial among many. I tried messing around with some AI to like spruce it up a little bit, but I couldn't get it to do what I wanted. It keeps mangling the faces of people so that if you're trying to do like a person, like if you try and get it to reimagine something in a different style, it'll kind of work, but it'll definitely be like, what's the way I've put it? It'll produce the best stunt double of the person you're taking you're modifying the picture of. So it doesn't really work with like famous. Like I was trying to do like a more psychedelic version of Ian Malcolm, right? Which I think went with the chaos theory thing, but the face just kept turning out wrong. I was like, you know what, screw it. So what I did instead was, mild spoilers. I kind of fused the original sexy Jeff Goldblum and like the 30-year later one that he did. And I AI upscaled them, which had this weird side effect of like getting rid of the chest hair. Like I guess the AI upscaling is like sees that as noise and like tries to get like rid of it didn't totally get rid of it, but it definitely decreased it. But like you're supposed to get like a high resolution image for this, and like the screen caps of it are at what the
yeah, I mean
12 whatever, right? Like
yeah, like
but I sat there and I hand edited it together myself because the proportions on the photo aren't exact, and I realized this. I'm like, I'm going to drive me fucking crazy if new Jeff's head is like 75% of the size of like old Jeff's head. So, and then when I arranged them, of course, the one like the old Jeff is like the way it's positioned in the frame is such that there's like a band of transparency at the bottom. So I'm using like the clone stamp tool to fill in the bottom with whatever's in the foreground, which I think is like the bottom of the couch that he's laying on. It's like I can get this to work. So we'll see how it turns out.
I'm very excited to see the final product. That sounds amazing. Is there anything else about Gen Con that you wanted to get after?
Actually, so I'll talk about this. So, a number of years ago, I went to the Cosplay Deviant when I was a sad, lonely single man. I went to the Cosplay Deviant's after party, and it was this kind of grimy, vaguely softcore kind of display. Because the Cosplay Deviants are like effectively a nerd porn site, right? It's like OnlyFans, but for like cosplay models. And they predate OnlyFans, and so it's a whole weird relationship. They run events at Gen Con. And on a lark, I went back this year just to like film my Saturday night, and the difference is they had it in a bigger, more open place, and the vibe was much more like, here's a bunch of nerds, and these nerds can feel confident that no one's going to make fun of them for dancing real cringily. And so everybody was dancing. I was like, you know what? I'm really enjoying this, right? Like, had a few drinks, got my dance on. They played a bunch of kind of fucking like, millennial bait music. So, and also a bunch of like nerd bait music. Like, I'm pretty sure they played like a techno remix of the Pokemon theme song that everybody sang along to. So, it was a good time. I would recommend it. They still have like the sexy dancers dancing in the middle with a bunch of gross guys like throwing dollar bills at them, which I don't know. It's not like a strip club, but it was weird. But it wasn't the worst thing in the world. And they had free food. But
well, yeah. Free food, that would get me in the door, I guess.
Yeah. All right. Well, since we were talking about Magic stuff, do you want to talk about proxies?
Yeah, we can talk about what's on your mind for proxies.
So, the seed of this was put into my mind, as many of our topics on the show have become lately, by the Distraction Makers podcast, talking about the role of proxies. And this thing that popped into my head is like, once we go down the proxy route, every card is on the table, essentially, right? Like, I'm building out these decks, and I don't need to worry about hunting down. Like, the biggest difference is, I have that like fucking field post in my Sauron deck that sucks. That's because that's what I had, right? Like, but now that the door's open on proxy, it's like, well, why would I use that when I can go get like, a Rakdos Signet or something, right? Like something that like is a better version of that. And it's like, oh, we've really kind of like opened the floodgates on like having. We have to be much more intentional in our deck building. Whereas like before, there's like this soft limit of like no one's going to pay $100 for like a demonic tutor or whatever, right? Now the only thing that's stopping us is like not printing a demonic tutor, right? Like it's our own restraint, and I wonder how that's going to affect the way the pod plays. And I would say the part of this that struck me the hardest about this is how unintentionally powerful Brewvac was, right? Like the reason I went to proxies is because Brewvac was like $13 for a card, right? And I ended up accidentally building what is at least close to a tier 4 deck, right? Like, it has a 2-card combo in it that I didn't realize I put in there. And it's like, oh, I just kind of unthinkingly picked the best cards, and that warped what that deck was, and now I kind of have to be careful about when I play that deck, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's interesting to me. There are a couple of things. I did just do this, and in fact, I have a bunch of proxies in the other room that I bought because they were impossible, but I kind of wanted to sort of have them. But I had this thing. So, for instance, Rachel has the Magda deck. So the Magda mono red Treasures and Dragons deck. I bought a card for that deck called Portal to Phyrexia, which is a 9-mana artifact that is maybe $45 or something. It's extremely, extremely expensive. Portal to Phyrexia comes into play, and it forces each opponent to sacrifice 3 creatures, and then on your upkeep, you choose a creature card in a graveyard and put it into play for you. So it is simultaneously a board wipe and a reanimator, right? That in the Magda deck is deployable at instant speed, right? You can just sacrifice 5 treasures, go find Portal to Phyrexia, and you have a one-sided, it's not even just a board wipe, it's a one-sided board wipe. It's not like you have to sacrifice creatures, you just force your opponents to do that shit. And when I think of myself as a smart, capable player of Magic, and I piloted the Magda deck the other day to a win, what are the situations where I say to myself, I'm not going to go find Portal to Phyrexia first? Portal to Phyrexia is an item, is an artifact that I just want to leave in there so that I don't so that I can need it, get it when I need it. It's like, no, you always get that first try. It's so good. It does everything, right? It generates you a ton of value. You can do it on your end step, wipe everybody's boards, attack with your it's just like, it's so good. And I have this thought to myself of, does it go in the deck? And what is it? And if it does, what does it replace? Right. Part of what I like about Magda and why I built that deck in the first place is because the engine is powerful but non-linear, is what I would say. Which is to say, it is a card that includes all of the pieces that it needs, but you have to have a level of jank in order to activate the power, which I think is really compelling. So just for anybody who doesn't play Magic and hasn't heard this, since I talked about it a couple of weeks ago, Magda is a 2-mana dwarf that says whenever a dwarf becomes tapped, generate a treasure, and you sacrifice 5 treasures, you can go find a dragon or an artifact in your graveyard or in your library and put it into play, right? 2 incredible, it is cool because Magda both generates her own treasures and then has this incredibly useful sort of sacrifice outlet for them. But the thing about Magda that I find so interesting is now you need to find dwarves in mono red and then tap them in order to generate the treasures. That's the jank that I think is cool, and the thing that keeps Magda from being like whatever, right? So you have a deck that has 1 mana 0/2s that have garbage abilities because it has the creature type dwarf and it will tap. And then you put a bunch of vehicles in there because vehicles are a great tapping mechanism. You can just tap all of your dwarves to crew a vehicle. Or you take this rare from Odyssey, Dwarven Blood Boil that says tap an untapped dwarf you control, give target creature +2/+0. Incredibly bad card that's so good with sort of Magda. But all of that jank doesn't make up for the fact that if you put Portal to Phyrexia in the deck, it is always the best thing to get. You just go get Portal to Phyrexia on like turn 4. And what does anybody do against that? Do you hold up in a braid or something in order to try and like take care of it? I have no fucking idea. But yeah, it's definitely something that I've been thinking about a lot because of proxies. How do you feel about proxying mana bases?
You mean like Soul Rings and whatnot?
I'm actually thinking about dual lands. This is something I was talking to Josh a little bit about today in the car. I was thinking about, on one hand, I think it's weirdly fair to proxy a mana base in order to make I do think that that's powerful, but I don't think that it's like whatever. But it also feels kind of the weirdest thing for our play group, because part of what we do is we play like these fucking tap lands. People have stuff in their deck that's like, the life land comes into play tapped, generates you 1 life. That's it. The temples, right, that come in and scry or whatever. Like that's it. Like, maybe even with the duels off limits, shock lands are quite good. I have shocks in 2 of my decks, maybe, just because I had some. I had a Watery Grave that went into Eureka, and I have another one I think that might be in like Lord Windgraves or something like that. But generally speaking, we're not playing shocks. We're not playing fetches. I don't really want to because I kind of think fetches suck. But like,
I run
yeah.
some fetches in AC because it's a landfall deck, but actually, yeah. So in Josh in the chat, and he said he isn't putting any tutors in his proxy order. I'm curious if he's putting any shocks in. I don't like that. That was the thing I was thinking about too. Is like because I'm setting these decks up on Architect, so I can like pull the list out and then like feed it into a converter that'll like give me a what's it called the proxy order. When I'm doing mana base, I usually go to my land box and I just pull out what I have, right? Like I don't, and I actually relatively recently ordered like another janky land box off of Amazon just so I had a bunch more basics because I was kind of running low. That does feel weird. Like Josh says he's doing some shocks, and I do feel like that's I don't feel like it changes the quality of the game that much, but it does kind of like lean into this kind of like now the limiters are off thing that I'm talking about, right? Like,
yeah, I super agree with that. I think in a world where even with proxies, I watch somebody play Marsh Flats and crack it to go get a hollowed fountain, or a scrubland, right? You know, scrubland is a do land, hollowed fountain is a shock land, Marsh Flats is a fetch land, right? That really changes the kind of timbre of what we're doing in Commander pretty dramatically. This actually happened. So friend of the cast who doesn't know the cast exists, or maybe he does, Ray came over on Monday and we played a bunch of Commander. He played a deck that had a Mystic Remora and Heuristic Studies, and I was like, what's going on here? And I destroyed the Heuristic Studies. He ended up winning with that deck. I destroyed the Heuristic Studies, but I just like, it really did feel like a step up. He played a strip mine against me. I actually won the game that he had that strip mine. He should have won it, but I, was able to pull it out because he kind of made a set of poor decisions, right? And it just hits different. It just hits different to hear strip mine and to hear Heuristic Studies, right? Because these are cards that I think all of us kind of intentionally avoid. It would be the kind of thing. Here's kind of the line I think I would drop. We've been talking about Commander Draft. I actually really want to get the Commander Draft up and running. My goal for the Commander Draft is that it is a long-term sort of thing. That sometimes we're playing our constructed decks. Sometimes we all just want to get together and we do a draft. And I think over the years, right, they do Masters and Modern Masters, Commander Masters, and all that kind of stuff. We will probably end up buying a box of that kind of stuff, right? And that always reprints all of the staples. So it'll have Heroic Intervention and Teferi's Protection and whatever else. If somebody were to proxy Heuristic Studies, that feels unfair to me in a way that somebody pulling Heuristic Studies out of the Commander Draft and putting it in one of their decks doesn't. And I kind of feel like that's a little bit of the same. So for instance, to wind back to Portal to Phyrexia, I don't think that's going to go into Magda, but it is going to go into another one of my decks, Saheeli. Saheeli is a big mana artifact sort of deck. And I think it will be fairer and feel better in that deck versus Magda. Magda, you have Portal to Fight, because Magda is kind of always a tutor. The toolbox edition I think is very cool or whatever, but you can always kind of like tutor it up. That's sort of bad, and you just don't want to put in something that is so obviously fundamentally the best thing that you can pull off of Magda every single time. But I would put Portal to Phyrexia in the Saheeli deck, because the Saheeli deck is about making a bunch of little 1/1 Thopters and then giving this next spell you cast affinity for artifacts and playing huge gigantic artifacts. And if I rip a Portal to Phyrexia that I drew and played, that just feels kind of like fairer.
Yeah.
And I also just think that in a weird way, I almost think of, I kind of have like an expanded game changers list, and I've just sort of put extra stuff on there. Portal to Phyrexia is sort of it's not a real game changer by like the rules of the game, but it is internally for me like a game changer. And I just wouldn't put it in every deck, even if it is just like the best big mana artifact that you could possibly slay.
Yeah, I do think tutoring is a big part of this. I think tutoring makes things feel much worse. I was actually going to say I have a Heuristic Study in the Augustin deck, but that's because I pulled it out of a pack that I played with. I pulled it out of a pack that from my work sealed group. That's actually like I pulled it. I was like, wow. Well, I guess this is going in the Augustin deck, right? And I think that's kind of a thing that got broken. Probably by me buying proxy, right? Like I feel like this is my fault, right? Because I'm the one that like broke the seal on it, right? Because I didn't want to pay $15 for Bruvac, right? Like,
also at the same time, I do think that you broke the seal on it, but I think it would have happened kind of anyway. It is wild that it happened right at the same time that sort of Distraction Makers made their episode on it, and it put us all sort of thinking about it and all the rest of it. But I think it would have happened anyway. And I do think that it is fundamentally a good thing, but it is the kind of just thing that like I feel like we just have to kind of like watch ourselves in a way. I also think that there's some stuff. So for instance, I just bought a ton of proxies for Lord Windgrace, which is my landfall deck. You kind of have AC as your landfall deck. Lord Windgrace is kind of my version of that same essential archetype of just playing a million fucking lands, all the rest of it. There's a bunch of cards that I have wanted to put in that deck for a long time, like Oracle of Moldiah, or like Druid of the Elysian Grove or whatever. These are all like $8 or $9 cards, but the reason that they are those is because of like legacy and vintage and modern. I would describe them as Commander staples, and I do think landfall is maybe one of probably the strongest strategy in kind of our bracket of Commander, just because lands are hard to interact with, and I think my two heuristics just to kind of prove this point. Number one, lands are hard to interact with at our level. Nobody is running Apocalypse or whatever, that destroys all lands. Nobody is going to be Armageddon is one of them. And two, games of Magic very typically come down to who spent the most mana, right? Or in other words, who played the most mana's worth of stuff, right? At the end of the day, if you played more mana stuff than your opponent did, you are probably going to win that game. And landfall decks just get to cheat on all of this kind of stuff. They generate so much value, and you just get to 14 mana on like turn 7, and you are just ripping haymaker after haymaker spell, and just nobody has like a good way to sort of answer that. I don't feel so bad about doing that with Lord Windgrace, because I think of the additional cards that I picked out for that as stuff that is expensive because it gets played in Modern, not really expensive because it's a Commander staple. It's not me putting Teferi's Protection, Heroic Intervention, whatever. It's me putting, I don't know, whatever, fucking Crucible of Worlds in there and stuff like that. But at the same time, it does have this effect that if I were to budget out every single card in that Lord Windgrace deck, it's probably like a $400 deck at this point, even if 30 of those cards are proxies of $10 cards or something.
Yeah, no, that's interesting, because I'm pretty sure I picked AC when I built that deck. For those at home that don't know the lore, there is a YouTube channel called MTG Remy that makes song parodies about MTG. And he made a song called like 10,000 Mana, which is about just like ramping and like not actually trying to win the game. And so I built the deck off of that, and I was looking for a ramp commander. I think I picked AC because I could get him out of a precon, and I didn't have to worry about buying him as an expensive single. Like, I think there was, I don't remember off the top of my head. Like when I built my first commander deck, I built Profiteer. I forget what his full name is, but it is a blue-white character that wasn't as expensive as Augustin. Like, I could get like a couple of this Profiteer character for like pennies because it wasn't a super good card, and I was mostly looking for like the color affiliation. I didn't buy Augustin, and part of this is unlocked by the fact that I have more disposable income now. Like, it is not the end of the world for me to spend $10 on a card.
Though other part of proxies that is interesting on that front is I just have really enjoyed the process. This is a new thing that I've only started doing since since I came to New Hampshire, really. But I love fishing for singles now. I don't know what happened. Like, some weird thing in my brain. I used to do this when I was a kid, way long ago, right? And when
What do you mean by fishing for singles?
So have you ever gone to a store and looked through the singles that they have?
No.
Okay. This is part of what makes, I think, Magda powerful, but contained in a way. With Magda, I did not make an architect list and then do a perfect thing. With Magda, what I did was Rachel and I went to a couple of different card shops over the course of a number of different weeks, and we sorted through the singles, and I said, pull every big artifact that seems like it would be good, and every dragon that seems like it would be good. And we bought a bunch of 50-cent rares, right? Because there are a lot of mono red dragons that just do cool, big, splashy effects. And we kind of assembled the deck out of that. Some of it was from my collection, right? But some of it was just literally just looking for, oh my God, here's a $2, just last night or 2 nights ago, we went to a place to look for singles for another deck that I'm putting together. And Rachel just found this 2-mana common dwarf thing called like Axguard Cavalry or something, which is just like, I was like, oh yeah, that goes in, that's a Magda card, get that card, put it in the deck. That feeling is really good. I actually really like that feeling of like, it's kind of halfway between draft, which is a very, very muted pool, but also, you are now expanding it to kind of the collection of a store, but just the process of just looking through cards and finding 10 cards for $5 from the rares at double midnight. That's like really fun. And proxies kind of ruins that fun, because it stops me from wanting to sort of do that thing. When I went to that card shop on Friday night, I actually sort of did it to go look for. I specifically was like, I don't want to proxy the commanders. I want the commander is a 75-cent card. I'm not going crazy. You know what I mean? Like, this is not like something in their case. It's probably just going to be somewhere in their dollar section, and I'm just going to find it and pay $1 and be fine with that kind of thing. And I didn't find it, but I found a bunch of other stuff. I ended up spending like $75 because I found a bunch of cool $3 and $4 cards that I was like, this is going to go, like this is going to go in the deck. But I also think part of it that I'm thinking about more is I'm also trying to avoid, I don't know how to say this, like common stuff. I was describing this to somebody the other day. I am building a deck. I was originally looking at Bant, which is the white allied shard, so green, white, blue. And I was looking at Ms. Bumbleflower because of the Bumblefogger deck that sounded so much fun on the Distraction Maker podcast. And I will maybe make that deck. I do think Bumblefogger sounds awesome, and I want to make that deck. But I just looked on EDH Rec, the website that collates this stuff. Bumbleflower has 17,000 decks. And I was just like, I don't know. I don't want to do this anymore. It's like, that's like too popular. Bumbleflower, I think, is like the 35 most played commander or something. She is ranked 34 out of all commanders. She is the top 0.2% of of commanders. And it's just like, I kind of don't want to be that person. And so what I ended up doing was I started looking at other band color combinations, and I found way down. Okay, this is the commander. Her name is Tokasia Digsight Mentor. Very important lore character from Magic. She has 1,125 decks. And she is rank 1,203. And it's like, this is a great commander to make. I feel the same way about it as I feel about kind of your Sauron deck makes me feel this way. Sauron is just doing an interesting thing, and it's not super good, but it's interesting and it's unique, and you kind of put your own spin on it. And I'm like, I feel like I want to do this from now on. I don't really want to look at a deck that I just kind of never want to play a top 10 commander ever. Yuriko is a top 10 commander. She's like, I think the third or fourth
Well,
most
she's a
popular
game
commander
changer,
of all
right?
time. Yeah, exactly. And it's funny because apparently she's not even like good in CEDH anymore, but just the legacy of it is so insane. But I just feel like when I'm building decks now, I just want I want to find weirder shit to build around than, like, I don't know, the most popular pre-con commanders of all time. I feel like if I were to go to the top 100, if I go to the top commanders list, how many of my decks are represented in there? I just want that number to be lower. Sam and Frodo is ranked 25. I have that Sam and Frodo deck. I obviously, like I said, I
Krenko
have
at 4.
She's ranked 6.
I have the other Sauron. I have the blue or the red black Sauron, not the Dark Lord.
Yeah. Wow. Bello Bard of the Brambles is rank 54. I have the Taval Precon. That's rank 55. That's actually kind of wild. That's so high.
Mothman's at 16.
Krenko would be high, but it was cheap and fun to make. Yeah. Magda is rank 73. That actually kind of doesn't surprise me, to be honest. Stella is rank 82. Oh, look at this. AC is rank 87. Tovalar, which I think of as not an incredibly strong deck, but honorably at rank 86. So it's like 5 cards. Yeah, so it looks like 5 cards are in the top 100. And I just like, I don't know. I just kind of feel like I shouldn't put any more in there. I'm sorry, I didn't look for your other decks, Josh. Let me just take a quick look. There's got to be like these Final Fantasy commanders I feel like are going to be
I would say Vivi's at like 65, I saw.
Ishtola is at 48. That makes sense to me. Sidar Jabari is 51. That's another Josh deck. That might be it. I think you might be safe from any of the other ones, brother.
Is there a way to like just search for like if you search for a card individually, will it tell you the rank?
Yeah, I think so.
Weird.
Oh, I'm sorry to tell you, brother. Rank 9 is Pantlaza Sun Favored, the dinosaur commander that you just ordered, and then Kranko is rank 4. So
Apparently, let me double check this. Ian Malcolm is ranked 480.
yeah, like I'm sure there are other commanders of mine who are pretty high up there. Like Lord Windgrace has to be like rank. Yeah, he is rank 127, so pretty high up there. Who else do I have that's that would be like a
Bruvax
good
288.
indicator? God, now we're just gonna spend the whole day fucking doing this. I can already tell.
Yeah.
Where is Ranar? Ranar's actually pretty far down. Actually, this makes me feel good because I like that Ranar deck a lot. Ranar is rank 565. But anyway, I am now just thinking about like I want to build command than I don't know than that. I have one more commander deck that I will probably build that's in the top 100, which is the Goshen Tai of Life's Origin for 5-color decks. And maybe we'll never return from it from there. What is that one? That's got to be like rank 46 is Goshen Tai. So yeah.
I would say my one that's in the Horizon Stiltskin is rank 1,243. So yeah. All right. Well, you want to talk more about proxies, or should we move on to the next thing? We're at an hour.
We can move on. There's a lot of other stuff to get into. The 11.2 first impressions. How do you feel about 11.1?
There were clearly some stuff happening in Tazavesh that was like a big reveal that I like didn't understand, and so I was hoping you could fill me in on some of the lore implications here.
Okay,
is the ethereals and the brokers being the same race? Is that a surprise? Were we not supposed to know that? I don't know anything about the ethereals, so I never really thought about it. Right? I was like, okay, that makes sense.
Okay, yes. The answer is yes. It was supposed to be a surprise. I think it's less a surprise and more sort of a confirmation from like a long running history of this stuff. I think if I'm honest, I think it's dumb. I actually don't know that I like it. It weirdly shrinks the world in a way that I don't like. By sort of saying that brokers and ethereals are the same thing. Brokers, the thing that Locust Walker says is that the brokers needed stronger containment suits for sort of the Shadowlands, which reads to me as, I don't know, kind of hand waving. It's sort of lampshading in a way. I kind of feel like the brokers were not intended to be ethereals, and they got kind of grandfathered in. Somebody sort of had the brain blast, and nobody would stop them from this, from sort of this feeling. And I don't know. I don't personally like it all that much. Like I said, I think it sort of shrinks the world. It's just the Star Wars thing that we've talked about in other circumstances. Yeah, like you want the world to be big and expansive, and that means not everything tie into everything else. And the brokers tying into the ethereals like this is kind of a problem. Those lines. If it could have been a million other things. I guess I won't, belabor sort of the point, but yes, this is our first big confirmation that brokers and ethereals are the same thing. This was not true in Shadowlands. This was not talked about in Shadowlands ever at all. The nature of Tazavesh being able to come out of the Shadowlands is also quite strange. And I would love to understand kind of the cosmology of it, but we're working in sort of a high fantasy D&D place that I don't particularly like in the first place. So maybe I'm just going to be a
negative
Nancy about it. Yeah.
Yeah. And from my perspective, it's kind of like, I don't know the lore well enough. It's like telling me that trolls and elves, or like trolls are precursor elves, that's surprising to me because like it's, they look very different. I had some semblance of them being different. I had enough knowledge to know that that's like surprising. Okay, that's an interesting lore tidbit. The Brokers and the Ethereals, it's like I don't know enough about either of them to be like, no, that it's kind of like, oh, okay, right? Like like that makes sense. Like, but it didn't seem like shocking to me, right? Like, because I think Illyria in like the cutscene is like, what? I'm like, oh, I'm supposed to be surprised by this. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the thing I hate being this person. I don't think that this is true. But I will say Koresh doesn't feel like it follows naturally from the other stuff in War Within. If I were a betting man, I would have said that we would have ended up in some sort of Rootlands piece
Mm.
of the War Within. We had all of that lead up with the Dark Troll. She even got you know what I'm talking about, the in the cinematic, she's doing that crazy fucking
Mm.
dance in the mushroom circle or whatever. um we got that lore about the tree that got pulled out, like the old like world tree that got pulled out, but its roots are still in, here, and we even see some of that stuff in War Within. I just really feel like War Within had a 1, 2, 3 of, the base patch, Undermine, and then Undermine in the Black Blood stuff takes us to the Rootland, to these like Rootlands, and we go learn Dark Troll shit. Um, it really feels to me like Koresh was not the intention. And that somewhere along the line they decided to kind of like pivot, and now we're kind of here. There's a bunch of other evidence that I feel like I could kind of point to, but I really hate being this conspiratorial in the first place, so I feel like I kind of want to leave it at that, to be honest with you.
No, that makes sense. My kind of like at first blush thought about it is like I'm sure we will do the Rootlands or whatever. I think maybe they're shifting pieces around because they have, you know, War Within, Midnight, Last Titan, all lined up that they can go to, right? Like, because
I wouldn't be surprised if the end boss of War Within was originally a Ridicron, and sort of this World Soul Saga stuff where we're pretty clearly pointing to a Ridicron in the Last Titan itself. Um, I would not be surprised to learn that that was sort of like an expansion of this idea. Um, yeah. The other big thing that I think about is how many new models did we get? And the answer is actually quite few. So, for instance, when I think of Koresh, that's a whole new world with all new. It's like when we went to Argus. When we went to Argus, we saw a ton of new creatures because we had never been to this planet before. Do you know what I mean? Some of which were demon related, some of which were Eridar, Draenei stuff kind of related. Koresh, it feels like I'm just fighting void demons. Like there's like observers and there's, whatever. All of that stuff is stuff we have. There's no new like void specific model of this stuff for this planet
yeah,
and sort of
they're
right.
devourers, but that's also from
Yeah,
Shadowlands.
exactly. And I'm kind of glad that that stuff is coming back. One of my big things is I think Shadowlands lore is actually kind of good for the game. And I want things to point back to Shadowlands lore. So the reintroduction of Devourers, I think, is great. I think Devourers are fucking cool, right? But at the same time, I don't know. I can't shake this feeling that this was not the intended sort of route for us to take. And Koresh feels weird as a result to me because of that. Again, conspiratorial. I really hate this mode of thinking. Don't listen to me all that much. Huge grains of salt and all the rest of it. But I don't know. That's kind of my 2 cents there. My other 2 cents though, which I love quite a lot, is that we're fucking teaming up with Xalatath. Yes, thank you. This is what if you remember, we had a podcast a long time ago where we talked about sort of predictions and stuff like that. And I laid out this whole vision I had for sort of Surgent Scarlet Crusade at the end of Shadow. I was like, the end of Shadowlands should be us going back to Northrend, teaming up with the Scarlet Crusade to fight the Jailer, and then the next expansion after Shadowlands should be fighting the Scarlet like light fascists fighting the Scarlet Crusade, right? Everybody made that pitch. This Army of the Light kind of pitch. I think that principle is being acted out here, but we're teaming up with Zalatath instead, and I just love every second of it. I am a huge fan of the good guys have to team up with the bad guys to defeat, the bigger bad guy. Oh, how great. So, it's not all bad. I'm enjoying that side of the equation quite a lot.
So I do have to ask, was this always like Silver Surfer Galactus thing? Was that always the thing? Because I was like, oh, it's really just that, right? Like watching the story unfold, it's like, I guess not Final Fantasy, Fantastic Four came out last week. Well, like, what was Dementius and Zalatath always that? Like, always had that relationship?
We always did not know what Zalatath was. Everybody had there were a number of different sort of theories about what Zalatath was deeper in kind of her heart. Because when you find Zalatath, she's imprisoned in the Black Blade, the Shadow Priest artifact, and she's talking to you kind of constantly. And then in Battle for Azeroth, you free Zalatath, you give her this elf body, and she gives the Black Blade to Sylvanas, who then gets it to Wrathion or something. And Wrathion uses it to imprison N'Zoth. Or actually, kind of more accurately, uses it to kind of breach his carapace, basically. Yeah, exactly. Galactus was always Dimensius always was a Galactus sort of style threat, going all the way back to Burning Crusade. And we knew that Dimensius consumed Koresh, right? That when Dimensius came to Koresh, the ethereal homeworld, he ate it up, nom nom nom, and then whatever. All of this stuff about the Revel and all that kind of, that's all new lore, but I think all that stuff is, like cool and great. Like I love the idea that, I don't know, there's like this like Krypton element of it, right? That they blew up their own planet to try and kill Dimensius rather than let him spawn. And that stuff is sweet, I guess. I don't know. So
is Zalatath a ethereal that's been put in an elf body?
No, Zalatath comes from my understanding but I've just played the same quest that you have, was that Zalatath's world had been destroyed by Dimensius, and she bargained her way out of that mutual kind of omnicide by pairing with him, which is the Silver Surfer kind of Galactus sort of archetype or whatever, and that she betrayed him on Koresh by telling the Revel how to blow up the planet rather than be consumed, basically.
Okay.
Huh. It is also a big confirmation that he's a Void Lord. We had never seen a Void Lord before, like understood what they were. There was actually quite a lot of speculation that he was not, or that Void Lords didn't exist. This was the speculation, that the Void Lords don't exist and they never existed, and Denathrius made them up in order to trick Sargeras, but that's now disproven. Void Lords are real.
Interesting. All right.
Yeah.
Do you have any strong opinions on changes? Like, you know how a couple weeks ago when we talked about this, I said I hope that Celestials is the dominant spec, because I like that better than Shadowpan. Well, turns out Shadowpan's good, so I'm switching back over and I'm learning it. Like, I spent 2 weeks learning Slicing Winds for no reason. I'm supposed to use Emperor's Last Capacitor, but I don't want to, so I'm going to try not to do that. This is like the putting Crackling Jade Lightning into the rotation. I'm going to try to avoid doing that until like in 3 weeks when I have most of a set and I run the Sims and Crackling Jade Lightning comes out at like 30% higher, and then I'll switch over, because that's what always happens. Is I insist on doing my own thing until like I stop parsing well enough to make myself happy. So
I get that. I am still playing Prot Warrior, though I am going to be bringing my Enhanced Shaman to raid because the Shaman tier set looks amazing. It looks so cool. I've kind of been waiting for 11.2 just because like I played a lot of WoW last patch, but mostly all I did was play Mythic. I feel like I didn't do anything interesting, and I kind of just want to be better than that this time. I want to do it different. So that's my new, I guess, conviction is to get the most out of this patch comparatively.
Yeah. I don't know. I may or may not play more of this. I don't know. I've liked keeping up. When it rolls over such that I get unlimited charges for the last patch, right, for 11.1, I will have all 4 sets of the raid armor for Monk, which I think is the first time I've managed to pull that off, so I'm excited about that. But I'll probably try and keep a pace like I always do. I haven't done it. Like, can we hit new heroic delve gear if we do 4 delves this week, or is it
in the vault? I believe the best thing to do is to do delves, but I am ignoring it.
Okay.
Or I'm doing it on my shaman, I guess, but I'm not doing it on Baron.
But I mean, for the like, if I went and did four delves today, would I have 2 heroic level slots in my vault for 11.2? Because usually everything trails by a week, and I don't know if that applies.
I don't actually know, but I think so. I don't know. Based on the way that Lokix was trying to get me to run delves off, I think that suggests that yes, that is probably the case. But
all right, well, I know what I'm doing after this, but
yeah.
Kind of another video game stuff just before we move on to other stuff. I've been tooling around with Supervive and what was the other one? The new Battlefield beta and Tactical Breach Wizards and Donkey Kong Bonanza. Do you have any interest in any of those in particular? Which order I should go with them in?
I have no particular interest. Take them as you want.
All right. Well, I'm going to start with Supervive. You played Supervive with me and Monica a couple of months ago, right?
Yep.
It is in 1.0 state. They have changed a bunch of stuff up. It is much cleaner. It's still there's still a high burden of knowledge. It's kind of got that like lull problem on top of everything, but I think you could still just kind of like play around it and be fine, right? Like you can just still kind of like roll face on keyboard and do what you want. It's just if you want to get into higher levels of play, you gotta learn how to use your relics and whatnot. I've only been playing solo. I know at one point we had convinced friend of the cast Lou to install the game, even though we never got around to playing it. But I would dip back into that. It's still neat. It kind of like scratches kind of the LOL itch without having to play LOL, and like the Apex itch without having to play Apex. High skill ceiling, nice champion variety. I don't know how long it's gonna last, but I'd keep playing it. Tactical Breach Wizards is a game that I played because I recently got. It's not with Enormous Breach. I will show it next time on the cast. I have a Miami Tiger Strike camo Wizards hat, which I both brought to our river trip and to Gen Con, and is a lot of fun. But I have had several friends of the cast mention Tactical Breach Wizards because one of the characters wears like a desert camo wizard hat. And so today I was like, I should put that on my Steam wish list and pick it up on a sale. And when I went to search for it, I saw a little tag that says, in your Steam library, which happens more often than I'd like to admit, where I have these games that I've bought that I don't actually realize I have. So I installed it and I played a couple of missions today. Fun little game. If you like what's the mech game with like perfect knowledge and the rewind? It's like an indie darling. I think it's by the FTL. No.
Devs, Into the Breach.
Yeah, Into the Breach. Thank you.
Yeah.
No, it's like Into the Breach, but with wizards and a lot of like throwing people out of windows, which is super nice. It is. I had thought it was a little bit more of a high production game than it was, but it seems it's like very clearly a kind of indie project. So I want to give 2 thumbs up to that. The Battlefield 6 beta is good. If you like it, if you like that kind of thing. As I've played more of these games, I realized that like I actually just don't like the combined arms thing as much as I would think I do, just because it's like I like kind of focusing on the infantry combat and the kind of vehicle stuff, and especially in Battlefield where it's like harder to like in Call of Duty, you can like equip your second slot to be like a vehicle killer slot, and you usually don't use that against players. You usually use that against like kill streaks. but like there's not as much of that, at least in the beta. And so if there's a tank around, it's kind of like, well, I'm not dealing with this. It's probably more realistic, but like, you know, not my favorite thing. And so I kind of like, I played a handful of rounds. It's a good time, but not my favorite thing in the world. And then the other big terrain destruction game besides Battlefield is Donkey Kong Bonanza, um, which for that game, that was a what was it? Everybody said is like, you know, the best platformer since Odyssey. And so I, of course, a big fan of platformers, went out and got a Switch and got Bonanza. And it's good, but it is worse than Odyssey. I actually, my hot take is that the terrain destruction thing makes it a less compelling game because instead of like doing the challenges the way that you kind of like you would in another game, which is kind of like, you know, do careful platforming, is you slam your radar on the ground, see shinies, and just go burrow straight to it. And you know, it's not quite that easy, but that kind of experience, I think, denigrates the overall platformer experience. So it's a fun game, but it is not my favorite. Although the game feels very good. So those are my high levels for those 4 games. Yeah, you have it.
That's interesting. I have heard a lot about Bonanza. My thing about Bonanza, or my interest in kind of Bonanza is how much people care about Nintendo being sort of Nintendo, and how much this is like a real sort of genre thing that kind of like moves it forward. The thing I kept thinking about with Bonanza was actually Astrobot, which was last year, which was also kind of one of these 3 platformers. Part of me sort of like wonders is like is the interest in here nostalgia? Is the interest in here you know, really that things are kind of being pushed to some next kind of level? I don't know. I'm just not I'm like you know what I feel like? I feel like someone who grew up in like Switzerland, and maybe like the Soviet Union would be a better example of this. Somebody who grew up in the Soviet Union and then came over to America, and everybody's talking about Disney, and they're like, "Oh my god, don't you fucking love Disney movies?" And then you watch Aladdin, and you're like, "I guess that was okay." Whatever. It's sort of how I feel about all of these games. I played Odyssey. I beat Odyssey. I don't know. I thought it sort of was stupid. I like, it's not that it was stupid. Not that it's stupid. I just like, I have nothing to say about it. There's just nothing interesting in Odyssey for someone like me, and I can't help but see that when I look at any of these 3 platformers. I'm just like, what is compelling here?
Did you do the challenge levels? Like, did you do the Dark Side of the Moon?
I don't think so. I only did the main. This was on an airplane.
Yeah, no, that is totally fair. So the problem is like kind of the way things have diverged is that like one side of this is like hardcore difficulty nuts, and that's like where you get like, you know, your Super Meat Boys and your like Endgame, and there's a handful of other platformers in the space that are built around being very tough and having a lot of restarts. And Odyssey, and I don't know about if Bonanza ever gets this hard, but Odyssey, because it is primarily a kids games, is completable without doing any of that. But if you're going to be completionist about it, there are some very rigorous challenges that are fun to complete in that way. Like I think I never finished the last part of Dark Side of the Moon, even though I thought that the initial one was like a huge celebration of everything that is Super Mario Brothers, like the first part of it. Excuse me. And so I think that's the piece you're missing, I guess, is that like if you don't enjoy super hard platformers, then digging through the easy part of Odyssey to get to the hard part of Odyssey isn't going to be worth it. But if you're like, I don't know, that's at least my read on it. If you're like a Super Meat Boy fan, then, you know.
I also just think my brain might be wired sort of differently. So for instance, so this is something I was talking about recently for an internal game that we're working on. I was sort of talking about how, so this was for, I will tell this story, even though I'm like breaking NDA or I was playing Montabi. I was playing a demo of Montabi. In Montabi, they added equipment, so you can equip your Montabi with a thing, and it will sort of give them like an effect. Over the course of my run, I found an equipment that was very unassuming. It was like a common level equipment, but it was like it was something. It was like something backpack, and I was like, and it read, whenever your Muntabi's hand is empty, draw a card. And I said to myself, there's no way this works the way I think it does. This has to have like a silent sort of once per turn clause in there, sort of, right? So what I did was I put it on a Muntabi that had a lot of 0 cost spells, like basically 1 and 0 cost spells, under the assumption that I would not be able to draw and play my whole deck multiple times because it just keeps drawing me cards into my. But it does work that way. It just if you fill your hand with 0 cost spells and you continue to have the action economy, essentially like mana or something, right? You can just keep ripping. You can just keep ripping spells. I used that to win a run or whatever, and I was giving this feedback, and people were like, "Oh, is that broken?" I was kind of like, "Yeah, it's broken, but it's broken in the way that I find really interesting." Right? This is the kind of thing that I'm looking for. I think I can imagine a version of a player who approaches Super Mario Odyssey and gets that same sort of feeling, but out of like using the hat in interesting or sort of. I felt like when I was using the hat in Odyssey, and maybe it's because it's a kids game and I was only doing the stuff. Everything was obvious to me. I never really had a good aha moment. Or maybe there were a couple. I don't know. It was a long game. I'm sure there were a few, right? But I bet that there are people for whom sort of solving that is the greatest feeling in the world. And I just don't think my brain is to accept that kind of, interface, basically.
I would say there's a couple versions of this, which is like there is the people who like breaking the game and like abusing the mechanics to like like this. I think in Bonanza there's ways to like manipulate the way you jump to basically fly now. It requires a fair amount of manual dexterity to do it. But like for me, what it is just kind of like the hard levels require good execution, and like that skill is something that I find satisfying to accomplish. Right, like it's the same type of thing where like parsing high in WoW or like getting a full combo in a DDR song. Right, like these are the things that like these feel good to me, and they indicate a level of mastery, and that's kind of the brain channel that it runs down. And I think I will give you that nostalgia is why I'm willing to like plow through all the kind of like look at the wall and punch it and get like a banana out of it, right? Like because it's right there stuff. All the literal low hanging fruit in Bonanza. To get to kind of the challenge. If I'm willing to plow through that because I like Nintendo so much. But I do think that there is like real challenge with the upper levels there. Although like I said, I can't say if I'm sure. I don't know if that's true for Bonanza because I have not played deep into the bowels of Bonanza.
Yeah, I do think that's pretty reasonable. Something I've been playing a lot of recently is Hearthstone and Hearthstone Battlegrounds. Josh and I have been doing a ton of duos, honestly, in Hearthstone Battlegrounds. And I think a similar force is kind of pressing on me in the same way that kind of Nintendo nostalgia is pressing on you. Like, I obviously have a lot of love for Blizzard and the IP or whatever. And I just think that there is I would say, obviously, that Battlegrounds is like a good, complete, interesting game, all the rest of it. But I just think the fact that I'm playing Murlocs and Murlocs play this way, or I can play a Control Warrior deck. The Control Warrior deck right now in Hearthstone is not great, but it is, oh God, it is so fun. And it is so core to the experience that I want out of Control Warrior. And I have won games with plays that make me feel like a genius. Do you know what I mean? Just because I understand kind of the nature of Hearthstone really well and all of that kind of stuff. Which I think part of that is I've been playing, like I like TCGs. I've been playing TCGs for a gazillion years. I like Blizzard. I've been playing these games and all of that stuff I think together. And I expect that something pretty similar is kind of happening. In the same way that I would push back anybody who tells me Hearthstone is a dog Battleground is a dog shit game, I'd be like, no, you're wrong, right? I would push back against the version of me that is saying this about sort of Bonanza. Really, I just think I don't get it, and I kind of never.
That's
will.
fair.
Yeah.
Say,
Funnily enough, also I was thinking about this with Stormgate. So do you know? Have you heard about Stormgate? Do you pay attention to Stormgate stuff at all?
no, what is
Stormgate is the game that the StarCraft 2 developers, when they all got fired from Blizzard because Blizzard was like, StarCraft 2 isn't happening, they were like, okay, fine. They got a bunch of venture capital money, they made their own thing. They did a huge Kickstarter that made like $1 gazillion. for basically what would amount to be essentially StarCraft 3. So it's all sort of the same devs, not all, obviously certain people aren't, whatever, but like generally speaking, it is supposed to be the spiritual successor to the StarCraft kind of franchise. Um, it has come out to kind of mixed reviews and stuff like that. And I'm seeing a lot of people who are complaining about a lot of different things. It's monetized in a way that's kind of predatory. People are accusing it of being predatory. I don't think it really is, to be honest with you. But the game is not. I kind of don't care. I should care about this. I love StarCraft. And Stormgate is leaning into the thing that I loved the most about StarCraft 2, which was the co-op aspect of it towards the end. And I just kind of can't care. But like, I thought to myself, if this was StarCraft 3 and it was not Vanguard, Abyssal, Celestial, I think, are like the three factions, but they map kind of to Terran, Zerg, and Protoss. If it was Terran, Zerg, and Protoss, I bet I would care. If it was Jim Raynor and Sarah Kerrigan, I bet I would care. You know what I mean? And I just think that that's like a piece of the that's a non-zero sort of piece of the puzzle to this stuff.
Yeah, no, I totally feel that. This was famously, and I think it was Marvel versus Capcom 4, I want to say. This was when Marvel still didn't have the X-Men rights. When Disney still didn't have the X-Men rights, and so they didn't put any of the X-Men characters in Marvel vs. Capcom 4, and whatever player that they had pulled to do player relations was like, guys, it's fine. This character has the same kind of like function as Wolverine. It's the same. And it was like, but it's not Wolverine. He's not going like Regular Barrage, right? It's like, I forget who the substitute characters and that matters, right? Like,
what's funny to me? I was also thinking about this with Magic. So I was talking about Takasia. You know what? So the Brothers War is like this is like the birthplace of like Urza, but it's just like a book that I read and I have reread a number of times. It's a really kind of great book or whatever. And I was thinking to myself, I should include the Urza cards in the Tokasia deck, even though they're not all that like they're not doing the same thing. They're not all that synergistic, just for sort of like the lore, like to respect the lore of it. And I feel like that's kind of like a similar in a way, like you kind of want, I don't know, it's the Vorthos instinct, right? Like you want Wolverine to match. I don't know. I don't even know how to explain that, I guess.
Yeah, no, I mean, but like, part of it's just like how if you're drawn to the aesthetic and a lot, like especially for fighting games, right? Like,
Yeah.
This is part of actually why I think I'm finding it harder to get into Warhammer. Is like, I like orcs, but like they don't really speak to me. Southern Creole in War Machine as an aesthetic, they're like these like piratey sea monster things, right? Like, I love that, and that speaks to me. I played a demo of War Machine at Gen Con, and I'm not convinced I actually like the system that much, because you can win the game by killing the Warcaster, and I managed to, like, in the demo, one-shot the enemy Warcaster, which I assume at like in like a real game, it works differently or something. Like, you just play more defensively or something. But because like none of the aesthetics really speak to me greatly, I'm just like not as on board with the Warhammer stuff. I don't feel as motivated to go finish painting my minis because of all that. Not that I hate the orcs, just like nothing like really like I really like Zangief, for example, right? I'm wearing a Zangief watch, right? Like, I will play Zangief in every Street Fighter game he's in. There are other grapplers in this version of Street Fighter. None of them have really spoken to me. JP, the new character, his aesthetic spoke to me. And I didn't really put in the time to learn him just because I don't have as much time as I used to. But like, I would learn him. The reason I haven't played Street Fighter for the past 2 years really, is because none of the DLC characters have really spoken to me. It's like a mix of returning characters, which I didn't really play, and like the new characters are not people that I find super interesting, and they're just like an important part of the way the game plays. You can't just you have to vibe, right? You have to vibe with it.
I super feel this actually going. I mean, I've made this argument in the past. Like, I don't think this is a representative of a change, but I think I even understated to myself the importance of flavor, really, I guess is kind of what we're describing. Because the argument that I made before is that nobody would play WoW if you stripped all of the, stripped all of the aesthetic, right? If it was ability button 1, ability 2, ability 3, right? If you're playing race 1, class 4, even if all of the gameplay was the same and you're pressing the buttons in the same order, nobody would play that. Which I do like. That is the fundament of the fundamental thing I'm kind of like describing. But I am really struck by the way in which I only really want to do things this way with this kind of I don't know. I think even then I was mostly making a counter argument against the people who were saying that lore doesn't matter, the covenants don't matter, all of that kind of stuff, right? That stuff does matter, and I think it's even more important than I gave it credit for in 2019 or whenever we were having these fucking arguments, right? Or you and I never had these arguments happened. I don't know, Reddit chats that I was furiously typing in, I guess. Because now I think about it, I think of the exact, I feel like I'm kind of in the exact same place. The reason that Eureka is so important is because the gameplay pattern matches this thing I really love, right? Not only is it like the nostalgia of my favorite deck that I was ever playing ever in my history of Magic was Mono Blue Ninjas during Kamigawa, which was an awful deck. Nobody should have ever let me play this deck. It was really fun and I did really well with it. And also it's in my 2 favorite colors, and also now it's in like the game. It's just like all of that stuff marries together to make for a Eureka deck that is like the defining sort of centerpiece of my deck collection, right? Same thing with Control Warrior and Hearthstone, same thing with like Elemental and Battlegrounds. I don't know. People just have preferences, and the strength of that kind of stuff is really easy to understate in favor of more deterministic kind of like gameplay goals.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally fair. I also think that there's like an aspect of aesthetics to game to certain mechanics too that like I think I'm thinking about this in regards to Magic, right? Like, there is a vibe with mechanics too, that kind of stands apart from kind of like pure effectiveness. This is kind of what we were talking about before, right? Like, um, there's a way that playing certain mechanics feels better than just kind of like, or feels more satisfying, maybe is the way to put it, than just kind of like always reaching for, the best thing at hand, right? Like, it did not feel as good to me when I won I won the Bruvac game by playing mill out half your deck, now double that, right? Like, they're just kind of like, okay, it's like not like a skill expression there, I guess.
Yeah, I feel that. I have won games recently with semi-infinite combos. I won a Stella Lee game where I truly had this. It was funny because afterwards everybody was like, "What the fuck?" But I was like, "This is the most gigantic thing." I'm so sorry. I played Stella. I had Soul Ring, Psychosis Crawler, Cerulean Wisps, and Mana Geyser in my hand, which gave me a turn 5 win. Basically, everybody was like ramping or whatever. I soul ringed into the Psychosis Crawler. Psychosis Crawler says whenever you draw a card, each opponent loses 1 life. And then I played Stella. I untapped with Stella. I ripped Mana Geyser, which gave me like 10 free mana on the turn. And then I did the infinite with Cerulean Wisps. Cerulean Wisps is a very simple infinite. It says draw a card, untap target creature, and Stella says tap copy target spell. So if you tap Stella, you can copy the spell that untaps Stella, and you can tap her again, copy it. That's the infinite that you'd like sort of like demonstrate sort of like the loop for. I actually quite like that kind of thing. We ended up playing 4 relatively quick games in succession because people had kind of real decisive wins. People got to just strong places, and there was a bit of back and forth, right? But eventually someone developed a game-winning position and pressed it to completion, which actually feels great to me. I kind of feel like the thing that has happened in some of our Commander games that gets us into these like 2 or 3 hour blowouts is people kind of gang up too hard on the arch enemy, and a board wipe happens and it sets the whole table back for 4 turns, and now we have just kind of added 45 to the end of this, like game or whatever. It was really nice to play a game where we were done in half an hour. People did some stuff, right? There was a little bit of ramping, but here I was, and I said, hey, let me just demonstrate this infinite combo. I'm gonna win the game, and we were done, right? Like,
yeah.
But it's also a little bit different to demonstrate an infinite like that. There's at least a little bit of like, then I'm gonna attack.
There's at least a little bit of dirtling.
Yeah. Walking someone through the process of that dirtle is probably the most satisfying part of hitting that combo. I don't know that there's much to walk someone through the process of, okay, I cast this spell, it mills half your library, and Bruvek is in play, it mills the other half. Yep. You're right. Sure.
Yeah. No, I'm two card. That is, I think, that's part of the feel bad of like 2-card infinites, right? Or 2-card infinite combos is that it's kind of like, okay, right? Like,
the funny part to me, what Josh said in the chat, and that was the day that I time sieved. Time sieve is an artifact that says tap, sacrifice 5 artifacts. Take an extra turn after this one. He was playing in his treasures deck. And as soon as it came down, I just took about 4 seconds to look at the board state, and I went, oh, Josh wins the game. And Sarian or Frank or somebody was there, and they were like, what are you talking about? And I basically demonstrated Josh's infinite turn combo of like, okay, so then he does this, and that generates, and then he sacrifices the 5 treasures to time sieve. Then on his next turn, he gets to do this, he generates 5 more treasures, sacrifices them to time sieve, and at this point, he can just take infinite turns and win. And it's like, okay, you got me. let's shuffle up.
I feel like it's an attitude shift from you, because I feel like a couple of months ago, we were in a place where Josh could have demonstrated an infinite, and you just like didn't tell him how to do it.
That is fair. That is true. That happened actually, and it was with time sieve with that treasure deck in Josh's apartment, and I watched it and I just shut the fuck up because I was like, holy fuck, he could go infinite if he wanted to, but Josh didn't see the line. Sorry, I'm not dragging you for filth, right?
Yeah,
but this is true. When Josh played the time sieve this time, he said, I played time sieve and I'm pretty sure I win the game. And then whoever the other person said, what? No. And then I was the one who walked them through the combo because I also saw it for what it was. Time sieve is a great card. What a card.
All right. Well, do you have anything else we want to talk about?
I don't think so. I don't. Did we hit on all of our stuff? We talked about Bonanza. We talked about 11 points. About Genkai.
Yeah. So we hit all of our existing stuff. Yeah. Well, should we drill out of here? Bust out of here?
I guess so. I guess that's the play.
All right. Well, if any of you would like to email us about any of the things that we talked about in this podcast, you can email us at nerdsplaygames@gmail.com or podcast@nerdsplaygames.com. You follow us at twitch.tv/nerdsplaygames where these go out live. Also at youtube.com/nerdsplaygames. Rate reviews wherever you can find podcasts. All the links are down in the description. Buddy, do you have anything that you are looking to promote?
I don't have anything that I'm looking to promote.
All right. Well, in that case, I'm going to say until next time, dear listeners.
Until next time, loyal listeners.